Alright, today we're going to talk about buying a used car and what all you need to know and what to look out for. That way you can make an informed purchase and be confident in your decision. First thing you want to do is when you walk up to the car, make sure all the body lines match up. Make sure they're flush. That one's pretty good. And make sure on areas like the hood, the gap down here is the same as the gap up here. And do that on both sides. That way you can know if the car has been in an accident and they made a half-assed repair. Because usually a good body shop will be able to line all the body panels up right, but a hack job repair, they can't do that. Next thing you want to do is pop the hood and look at areas like the fender right here and look for a straight edge paint line. That would mean it's been taped off and repainted at some point. And as you can tell by this one, it's worn off. It's never been painted. Under the engine, with the engine cold, I always like to check a vehicle with the engine cold. That way, if there's any intake leaks, intake manifold gasket, or cracked manifold itself, or cracked elbow fittings for the PCV, you'll be able to tell when it's cold because it'll run rough. It's getting too much air and not enough fuel, so it'll run rough. But then when the engine gets up to temperature, the affected plastic will swell up and seal the leak. So while you're in here, just check the fluid, check the engine oil. Engine oil's good. Check the transmission fluid, coolant, brake fluid, what have you, whatever you want to look at. But next thing you want to do is look at the tires. Nobody will put new tires on a car they're getting ready to sell because they'll never get their money back. As you can see by these, they have okay tread, but they're dry rotted. So these tires need to be replaced bad soon. I bought this car knowing that, and I negotiated that into the price. Also check your brakes while you're down here. Feel the rotor for any grooves. Anything that you cut your fingernail on, there's none on this one. And look at the brake pads. Those still have plenty of life left on the pads, so we should be good on brakes. But just because they look good doesn't mean they are good, because the rotors could be warped, and we'll talk about that when we go for the test drive. Next thing I like to do is get on the ground and look underneath the vehicle. Look for rust. As you can see, these rocker panels, they have a little bit of surface rust, but nothing real bad. Nothing eating through the metal yet. And under here, it looks like it's been undercoated at one point. That's just surface rust. You can get that off of the wire wheel. In the suspension components, there's no scaly rust. And I've already bought this car, so I know that the muffler, there is no holes in the muffler. There's no exhaust leaks at all. Just, if you live in the Rust Belt of America, that's one thing you want to look out for. Next place I would look is the interior of the car. And other than the inside of this car being tremendously dirty, there's really nothing wrong with it. And when we go for the test drive, we'll test all the features out, make sure they work. Look at the back seats. Just more junk. That's the way I bought this car. I like to buy cars dirty like that because it just shows that people, they're just ready to get rid of it. If there was any imperfections, like if the car was blown up, they'd clean the interior the best they can, so you would see the shiny interior and not worry as much about the blown up motor, or if the transmission was out, or if it needed a CV axle or what have you. Before we start the car up, another thing I want to talk about is I like to find cars that have the valve stem cover back on, because that just shows that they have enough initiative to air the tires up and have the presence of mind to put the valve stem cap back on. It shows that they take care of their car. Even though these tires are a little bald and dry rotted, they hold air just fine. They're probably a cheapskate and didn't want to replace them. I understand it, but just one thing to look out for. Next thing you want to do is get the keys, get into the car, and start it. And we'll go over what to do next. You want to make sure that all of these warning lights go off when you start the car. And some light, like the supplementary restraint system, the seatbelt light. If I bought this car in Ohio and brought it back to Kentucky where I live, I'd have to get it inspected. And if I got it inspected and that light was on, it would fail. So I wouldn't be able to register the title. Or I wouldn't be able to register it in my name. So just make sure when you start it, all those lights go off. That seatbelt light will go off when you plug your seatbelt in. See? And the door jar light will go off when you shut the door. Next thing you want to do is just test all the features. The headlights are on. I can see them up against the garage, both of them, and the fog lights. And one thing I did notice is this car has a vibration, and with these 1999 to 2011 Ford Focus, the motor mounts will go bad. And I've already replaced the passenger side motor mount, the hydraulic one, and I'll have another video on how to do the dog bone mount and the transmission mount, because they all go bad together. Once one goes bad, the load goes onto the other two, so they all pretty much fail at once. Anyway, check the radio. This radio is staticky. That's because there's a bad radio interference capacitor under the hood on the engine. That'll be in one of the videos. Turn that off. Once the engine gets up to temp, test the heat. You want to make sure this works on every setting as well. 1, 2, 3, and 4. If it only works on one and not the others, chances are the blower motor resistor has gone bad. Pretty simple fix, but all of these work. Then you want to check the vent setting, and as you can see, this one was broke. The problem is the cable. It's not electronic, it's an actual cable that goes from the vent to the air box that controls the blend door or the mode door. So after a while that cable will gum up and it will snap, which this one has. All these are things you want to keep into consideration when you negotiate a price. Next thing, make sure transmission engages, there's no clunks. Make sure it works in every gear. Neutral, drive, second, first. They all engage fine. Make sure all the windows work. And this car is pretty basic, so there's not much to see or test really. See, they all work. Make sure the power locks work. Get here, all 4 doors working. And next thing to do is take it on a test drive. I am lucky there is a bit of frost on the back windshield, so we will press the defrost, make sure that works while we're driving. Make sure the lights dim. Can't really tell, but they do. There you go. Those work. Next thing, we're going to take it on a test drive and talk about that. And once you're on your test drive, make sure your brights work, things like that, turn signals, and make sure your engine gets up to temperature. If it overheats, that's obviously a problem, but it's also a problem if it doesn't heat up all the way. Now, I realize a lot of people don't have a scanner. They can't take a scanner with them to see what the engine coolant temperature is getting up to. But you'll be able to tell by the gauge. It's supposed to go to the middle. Almost every car, at least every car I've ever ridden or driven in. And if it's not getting to the middle and it's below that, that means your thermostat's stuck open. And that would cause things like poor fuel economy, and because the engine's not running in a closed loop, it's an open loop constantly. So just one thing to keep in mind. But while you're driving it, you want to get up to about 50 miles an hour and take your hands off the wheel, and make sure the car doesn't pull the one side or the other. And if it does, that could be indicative of a brake caliper that's sticking, or a low tire on that side, bad tie rod, control arm bushings. It could be all sorts of things, but this car doesn't do that. So, see what's next. Once the car is up to regular operating temperature, you want to mash the accelerator. And make sure when it shifts, there's no flares in between shifts. In other words, make sure the RPM gauge does not jump, because that means you have transmission work you'll need to do in the future. You have a slipping transmission, the clutch discs are wearing out, or you're losing line pressure. It's one thing to think about. Another transmission test to do is while the car is in overdrive. If your car has an overdrive off button, you want to press it to make sure that it disengages. That's overdrive off. That's on. That's off. That's on. And make sure the shifts are crisp and smooth when it does that. That way you know your overdrive bands are good and you don't need transmission work. Next thing you want to do is get up to speed. I'm at 55 miles an hour on a straight road, and stab the brakes. When you do that, if the car pulls to one side or the other, that you have a bad caliper on that side, or it could be a warped rotor. And another thing too is press the brakes hard while you're driving, but don't stab them like you did to see if the car pulls, just to make sure your rotors aren't warped. Now, this car has a side-to-side motion in the steering wheel when you you lay on the brakes, so this is going to need some brake work, probably some rotors, and while you're at it, you might as well replace the pads because they're cheap enough. Now we're going to go back home and mull over what we learned on the test drive and in the pre-test drive inspection, and what to do from there. Now that you're back from the test drive, you need to keep in mind what all you found wrong with the vehicle in order to... Now that you're back from the test drive, you need to take a mental note of everything that was wrong with the vehicle. That way you can factor that into your negotiating in order to get a fair price for the vehicle you're going to buy. But I hope this video helped you. If you have any other questions, please comment and ask. Otherwise, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, because all the things we found wrong with this vehicle, we are going to make videos on how to repair them and how to properly do it. So please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll keep you posted on when the next video is.